Hello, and welcome to another episode. This is going to be my first episode on facts that aren't true. What that means is this is a list of things that are commonly believed by a whole bunch of people, but they are factually incorrect. I have compiled a list of 65 of them. I'm going to do 10 in this episode, and hopefully we get through all of them at some point. Now, although these facts aren't true, sometimes there's a kernel of truth to it, and sometimes the reason it's not true leads to some interesting insights about other things, but there's always something to learn from these. Let's get started. Before we begin today's episode, I want to tell you that if you like this content and you want to support me, there are links to my Patreon, Venmo, and more in the description on Spotify, or you can go to my YouTube channel and click in the link in the banner that says support the channel. You can also check me out on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Just search Planet Peterson on those platforms. Okay, back to the episode. Fact that isn't true, number 1. Humans only use 10% of their brain. The origin of this claim can't directly be pinned down. Nobody ever said or wrote in any book, we only use 10% of our brains, until everyone already believed the myth. There are no psychology books or biology books or neuroscience books from 100 years ago where this specific claim can be pinpointed to. Even if we try to stretch the meaning, this argument still falls apart. For example, we probably store everything we've ever experienced in some way in our brains, which is how we make sense of the world even though it's always changing. There's always a mental heuristic to call upon. Some people have a condition where they can't forget anything. They can tell you what they did 30 years ago to the day, what they wore, who they saw, and what they were wearing, everything that was said, etc. But if that's what we mean by 10%, then clearly the typical person doesn't even come close to using 1/100th of 1% of their brain, let alone 10%. Fact that isn't true, number 2, cracking your knuckles causes arthritis. There just simply is no data that backs up the idea that cracking your knuckles can give you arthritis. We also don't really know what makes knuckles crack. The leading idea is that air pockets form in the fluid in our joints. It's called synovial fluid, and then those bubbles pop. So it's basically like we're making bubble wrap and then popping it constantly inside of our joints. It could also be that tendons or tissue slides over the bones inside of our joints, which can be irregular, and that causes part of the sound. Or maybe it's a combination of many things. Fact that isn't true, number 3. The Great Wall of China is visible from space. To answer this, what we need to know is what's the smallest apparent size we can see. A large object 10 feet away takes up a large part of your field of view, but that same object a mile away takes up less of your field of view. Eventually, it will vanish from your view as it gets farther away from you. The whole field of view thing is just a trigonometry problem. So what we really need to know is, what is the smallest angle a person can see? It turns out to be about 0.02 degrees. The Kármán line is generally accepted as the boundary of space. It's only 100 kilometers above the ground. Meanwhile, the International Space Station orbits 400 kilometers above the surface. But even from the Kármán line, the Great Wall of China, which has a width of only about 15 feet or roughly 5 meters, makes an apparent angle of 0.0015 degrees, which is much too small to be able to see. Fact that isn't true, number 4. Humans have 5 senses. The traditional 5 are sight, smell, hearing, touch, and taste, but we have many more. For example, there's proprioception, which allows us to perceive the position of our body. You can test this. Close your eyes, as long as you're not driving, and hold your hands out. You can sense exactly where the tips of your fingers are. That's proprioception. Now, do this again without opening your eyes. Touch your nose. You may miss, but probably only barely. Again, that's proprioception. There's also thermoception, which is the ability to sense temperature. Nociception, which is our ability to feel pain. Interoception, which is the ability to sense hunger, thirst, the need to use the restroom, and more. there are our vestibular senses, which are located in the inner ear and act as our gyroscope and our accelerometer. It allows you to know when you're upside down, when you're moving, when you're unbalanced, when you're accelerating, and more. Astronauts in space often get motion sickness because there is no acceleration of gravity in space because they're orbiting, and so the vestibular sense has no way of telling what's up, what's down. Those terms are actually meaningless, and it confuses the body and makes them sick. There's also chronoception, and that's basically your circadian rhythm. It helps us estimate the passage of time without the use of external cues. Fact that isn't true number 5, eating before swimming causes cramps. Again, there just simply isn't any data to back this up. Fact that isn't true number 6, bats are blind. So not only are bats not blind, they don't even have bad vision. You may be surprised to know that bats are the second largest group of mammals after rodents. Only around 1% of bats are active during the day, but even the ones that are active at twilight or during the nighttime don't have poor vision. It's true that bats rely heavily on echolocation, but their vision is actually just fine. Fact that isn't true number 7. Chameleons camouflage to blend in with their environment. Chameleons do change color, and for a variety of reasons, but not to blend in. Male chameleons will turn bright red to send warning signals to other males. After 2 male chameleons fight, the loser will hang upside down and turn a dark brown or purplish color to indicate, okay, you win. They will also turn a darker color in order to absorb more or less heat from the sun. Chameleons are green, and they do blend in with their environment because they're green and they live in trees. Chameleons will revert back to their normal color when not communicating or trying to warm up, but that's not the same as saying they change color in order to camouflage. As a comparison, the way cuttlefish and octopi change color in order to match their changing surroundings is an example of changing color in order to camouflage. But if you put a chameleon in a tank with artificial purple leaves, the chameleon will not turn purple. Fact that isn't true number 8. Napoleon was short. Napoleon was average height. Part of the confusion was that while the French and the British both used units called feet and inches, they weren't the same. French feet and inches were longer than British feet and inches. So in French measurements, Napoleon was 5 feet 2 inches, the equivalent of 5 feet 7 inches in British units. But a British person hearing he's 5 foot 2 makes them think that he is 5 foot 2 in British units. Now, 5'7" is below average today, but it was average at the time. You'll probably be shocked to know that the average weight of a soldier in the Civil War was merely 125 pounds. Adding to the confusion was the blatant propaganda pushed by the British. Is there anything that isn't the British Empire's fault? Fact that isn't true number 9. Shaving makes hair grow back twice as thick. First of all, it's really unclear what this means. Does it mean that the hair follicles themselves grow twice as wide every time you shave? Or does it mean the density of hair follicles doubles every time you shave? Either way, it doesn't matter. This is an absolutely preposterous claim. If you shaved twice, then your hair would be 4 times thicker. After just 10 shaves, your hair would be 1,000 times thicker because it gets twice as thick every time. Now, obviously that isn't what happens. Where this comes from is when you do shave, what ends up is the razor creates a very nice flat surface at the tips of the hairs. Hairs that have been growing are likely to have frayed or narrowed tips to them. Because the hair is shorter, it's also stiffer after you shave. The combination of those two things makes shaved hair feel much coarser and rougher, and so I'm guessing that people said it's twice as thick for those reasons. The final fact that isn't true is that it takes gum 7 years to digest. In reality, we have absolutely no idea how long it would take for gum to be digested. It might actually be almost totally indigestible. Most of the gum that we consume actually isn't natural. It may have some natural sugar in it, but the flavorings are pretty much always artificial, and the bulk of it, the stuff that you chew, is actually a type of synthetic rubber. So if you took gum and took some stomach acid or some digestive enzymes and just put it in a jar for 7 years, the gum would probably actually still be there. But the claim specifically implies that the gum will stay in your digestive system for 7 years. That is completely untrue. Gum will get pushed out of your bodies after a few days, just like everything else. So that was installation 1 of Facts That Aren't True. Even if you didn't believe in any of these untrue facts, or you had heard them be debunked before, hopefully there was some additional information that you were able to learn from this. Thanks for listening.